technical issues, you're just going to have to steer us in the right direction, Bill. Because
I can talk crap for 20 minutes. It's fine.
for some reason, my Wi-Fi doesn't like any sort of really bad weather, so every now and then I sort of drop
Yeah,
out.
it's not great at the moment, is it?
No.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, guys. You're supposed to have internet that can survive a mild drizzle. You know, it's like, what world do you live in where it starts raining and your internet company goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, no, we can't give you internet now. It's far too much difficult to push the internet out the wire."
Norfolk internet. That's
It's terrible.
Hello and welcome to the Pop Culture Pausecast. I'm Mike. Over there is Bill.
Yo.
And we are with the co-founders of Wave Game Studios, Dan and Nick. Independent publishers of games such as Intrepid Izzy, Flea, and now for the Sega Dreamcast, a port of Postal, releasing on June 2nd. Their mission is to bring more exposure to indie-developed video games, to retro fans around the world, whether that's for the PlayStation 4 and 5, the Nintendo Switch, and most interestingly, the Sega Dreamcast. How you doing, guys?
Great, yeah, great, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah.
You're doing good.
Mike, has anyone ever said to you when you do those intros like that, you sound like one of those kind of pre-recorded Google voices that say, "Turn left, you are going down the wrong way. Enter the roundabout and take the second exit."
It's just very informative, but
It's
that's
very good. I'm not criticising. It's just
That's what happens when I make videos in my spare time. Everything sounds like I'm trying to enunciate everything. Everything's trying to sound dramatic. But
it's just I just thought, maybe you got a career in there. Anyways, look, we'll talk about that after the show. We've got a guest.
So guys, one thing I did want to ask is, what was it exactly that made you take the leap on publishing video games? What sort of got you from your general sort of 9 to 5 to, okay, this is what we want to do sort of for our spare time now?
It's a pretty good question. The truth is, we've always been friends with developers over the years, and I've got some development experience myself.
Yeah.
And what we've kind of found is that a lot of indie games, particularly the ones that are published for older systems, which is what we specialize in,
Yeah.
they never seemed to really get far enough into the public consciousness for our liking. We always felt like there was a lot more potential. And because we've got a really long history of working in marketing, I've worked for marketing companies for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And Nick has a really long retail management experience. We thought that we were sort of in the best place possible to combine those skills and just try and get this stuff out there, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought it was quite depressing when you have all these really good independent games, and they'll go through their initial phase. Maybe it will be on some platform,
Kickstarter.
like Kickstarter, yes, main one, and whoever backed it would have heard of it, and then outside of that sort of usually quite small circle, it wouldn't get any additional exposure. So these really good games that have had hundreds and hundreds of hours of work put into just aren't being seen by anyone, and it's just a massive shame. And as a fan of games, I want to make sure that more developers see it worth their time to keep creating things. So I feel if we can put something out for them, and people can see that it's beneficial, then they're going to keep doing it.
So what kind of stuff did you say you were developers beforehand? Before you
my history is sort of in web development primarily, but I've also I've done a lot of game modding. So there was an engine years ago released in 2003 by Senile Team, who published Intrepid Izzy, and that was called Beats of Rage, which was a sort of a Streets of Rage inspired game engine.
Right.
So I used to put like a lot of games together using that engine, which is jumping forward a little bit in the story, I guess, but that's basically one of the reasons why I got involved in the indie scene in the first place.
Oh, okay. So you kind of got your foot in the door, understanding the industry and stuff, and then decided to pull back. Probably one of the, both developing and publishing has its own challenges and stuff, but I don't often hear too many people sort of going in the worlds of developing and moving over. But I can imagine there's quite a few people out there that are pleased to hear there's someone who knows their background, but also allows them to knock down that publishing door, because that can be, like you say, a big roadblock for people.
Oh, it definitely helps. Yeah, having sort of, I guess, almost 20 years of experience in the scene, as it were, and luckily we know a lot of the players, so it's very helpful to be able to say, hey guys, this is what we're doing now, and we want to get your stuff out there, and it just works out.
Great.
I think one thing I like about, from what I've seen from your socials and things, is like, obviously when there's a perception of like indie developers that they're like these really passionate sort of driven people, but when it comes to the publishers, there's almost like this negative stigma that publishers are just kind of this like money grubby, work out for themselves type thing. But I feel like from what I've seen in your socials and things like that, there seems to be like a genuine like care about the games that you're putting out. It doesn't seem like you're doing, obviously there is that nature of it, but you're not.
Yeah.
When you push out a game, it feels like you genuinely care about it, and even after like months, maybe even a year after it's come out, you still seem to have that passion for it and still seem to keep promoting it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that is exactly how we feel. We do it because we love it. We're not really in it for a living. We just want to push this stuff as far as we can. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we obviously want to take on games that we know we're going to enjoy playing as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, we don't take it on otherwise.
But what you were saying about the sort of stigma of people sort of seeing the like publishers as
the more commercial side.
Yeah, purely sort of business. We when we did our first sort of trip around and we were meeting all of these independent store owners in person, it really did help, because we could have much more of a personal sort of relationship with them, and more than a few people said that they'd been approached by people,
guys in suits.
Yeah, and we went in there very casually, just wearing our hoodies or whatever, and it did make a difference to them, because they could kind of see that we were kind of more relaxed, and they kind of felt more comfortable speaking with us. So yeah, I think that's just our whole sort of approach to everything. It's just pretty chill, to be honest.
It gives you much more of a kind of relaxed brand, doesn't it? And I think that's important when the pressure of trust and investment, from some of the stuff I do, when someone comes in to try and say, oh yeah, trust in me, invest in me, and I'll put your product out there, you're kind of like humming and hawing. And if you guys are quite relaxed and you are similar on the same wavelength as people, that sort of relaxes. So for the purpose of the people that are listening, in case they're not too sure, where the lines are drawn, can you just quickly take us through the kind of stuff you would do for a developer, what it means to be a publisher, what kind of things you contribute, so people can understand what that actually means?
It does vary quite a lot, actually. There are some developers like C in our team who have got pretty much everything in place already, where they pretty much just need like manufacturing and distribution. So for them, they build the game, they advertise the game themselves, they've got their own following, and they say to their own audience, look, this is what we've got coming out, are you interested? Maybe they'll even take pre-orders themselves through Kickstarter. But then they don't have the sort of like manufacturing experience that we have. So that's something that we can do for them. And then obviously distribution to particularly UK-based game retailers. That's kind of like where we're beneficial for them. But then there's other developers where it's maybe just one guy and he's got no experience at all with this stuff. And we can help with advice on, how to write games for Dreamcast for one thing, or Mega Drive or whatever system it happens to be.
It could be on the art side as well. As they sometimes we've been approached, and they've got great art. They already know exactly what they want on like the front cover, and they've got like manual ideas. Other times they don't, and they need some help making that up. So it is definitely on a person to person sort of basis. Obviously we take a look at what they've already got, what their strengths are, and we're not going to be stepping on their toes. If there's something that they're happy with, then we'll keep it in there as much as we can.
Quality.
So basically, yes, it depends.
Now, one of the most fascinating things about Wave Game Studios is the dedication to the Sega Dreamcast. Now, what is it? How did that come about, and what is it about the Sega Dreamcast that keeps you still producing games for it?
Sometimes there's an intangible quality about a certain system, from a nostalgic purpose point of view. I personally just look at it as the system that I really loved, and the system which I didn't really feel had enough love at the time.
No, definitely.
It also helps that it's pretty easy to publish games for it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main thing. I mean, there's other positives as well. Like, obviously, because it has got a smaller library, if, for example, you were a collector and you wanted to have everything, it's kind of a bit more approachable in that sense as well. Yeah.
You said it was easy to publish for. Why is that?
Because the copy protection is non-existent.
Even after all that trouble they went to try and make the game's copy protection, it was like broken in the first week or something. I remember someone saying on the internet.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that was obviously part of the downfall of the system in the first place, but it provided a route for indies to publish for it from pretty much day one. I mean, it's this stuff has been coming out for the last 20 years now, and it's not. If anything, it's speeding up.
Fascinating. It's amazing how things turn out, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any retro consoles that you've either sort of wanted to publish for, or you sort of have tried and the architecture's too complicated, or anything to that sort of nature?
To be honest, the most tricky system are cartridge-based systems, mainly like your NES and your Super Nintendo.
Yeah, of course.
Because I hate to say it, because it's sort of like starting to talk about the more commercial side of things, but the cost of producing like a Super Nintendo cartridge is pretty high, and it means that it's like maybe slightly less viable for indies to start tackling that.
Well, it's bumping up the costs, and obviously we really want it to be in retail, and I think
we want to be affordable.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, if it's not sort of a spontaneous pick-up purchase, which I think a lot of the time it will be, it's going to struggle. So obviously keeping it within a reasonable price range is very important.
Yeah, it's a pretty hard sell when you have to sell an indie game for £50 or something. It's just... we always want everything that we do to be affordable, because it's all part of the spirit.
Yeah, I mean, it can be quite a big gamble on a franchise that's unrecognised, on a brand that hasn't been established necessarily just yet. When you slap that tag on there, even some games that that are released by people who are trusted publishers themselves, like the one that immediately comes to mind is Cruisin' Blast, which is a fun game, but it came out at like £45, and it's an arcade game, and that's been published by Nintendo, and you just sort of like, really? Wow. If you get that with those, I don't know what you call them, AAA titles or whatever you want to call them, then you're going to find that with indie titles that are the ones you support, surely.
The interesting thing about that, though, is when you look at the price of, let's say, a Nintendo 64 game, I distinctly remember that Pokemon Stadium 2, when it came out, was £55. And that was early 2000s, late 90s to early 2000s, I can't remember the exact time. But that would probably be roughly about a £90 game now. Yeah. And we sort of thought nothing of it back then. That was just how much it was. But it just gives you an idea of how much more expensive the cartridges are versus CDs or floppy disks or whatever other media it happens to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
is there any sort of desire to sort of do anything for the disc-based systems, whether that be the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation 2, or anything like that, or is that sort of
Basically not possible. We would love to do a Saturn game because the Saturn was probably my personal absolute favourite system.
Get in, see, Mike. I told you you're wrong.
It's just unfortunately that it's not possible. The Mega CD is possible, but the Mega CD is basically just a Mega Drive on steroids. So you might as well just make a Mega Drive game at that point. PS1, PS2, not possible.
When you say it's not possible, just again for the purpose of people who might not know, what do you mean? What stops it being possible compared to things like the Dreamcast?
It's basically the feasibility of manufacturing a disc that is then playable.
Right.
So the Dreamcast, it's possible because of the non-existent copy protection, and that's the same for the Mega CD, and also the Amiga CD32 is a good example of that. Potentially the Jaguar CD as well, but the PlayStation 1, 2, up, it's not possible just because that copy protection is there, and those companies are no longer allowing you to license. The licensing is no longer in place. So no matter how much you wanted to, and no matter how much money you was putting in Sony's palms, they just wouldn't allow you to do it.
Right.
interesting?
And what, with regards to sort of a lot of what you talked about at the moment is all physical. Is that Wave Studios' way that you will always be physical, or do you, if a developer came to you and said, "Look, I really want to get something on a digital marketplace," would you also help them as well with that?
That is a very good question, and it's something we've been asking ourselves for a long time. The answer is we don't really have a full answer on that. I think it's important in the gaming world to do something which makes you unique, and perhaps if we went into that realm, then we wouldn't be quite so unique anymore.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm a physical guy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I would much rather have things on a disc or a cartridge than I would on a digital platform. It's just in this kind of world, there's you know, it's a kind of 50-50 split, and it's getting different all the time. So I just thought, you know,
years. I think we'll always be the retro guys, basically. We've got a few titles which we're distributing for other developers based in the US. We've got a couple of Switch titles, for example.
brilliant.
But that's more a distribution thing rather than a publishing situation. But never say never. I don't want to ever rule anything out, because at the end of the day, we'll do what the people want us to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting world. You see people like Limited Run Games, and you know, Signature Games, all of those companies that make a business around releasing games for consoles that are not going to get the physical release or never got ones and that kind of stuff. So it's not as if you're closing off the market to yourself. Like you say, you might be making yourself unique, which is a good move.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, hopefully it's the right approach.
Best of luck. Hope it works.
Thank
Now,
you.
obviously, you've done all these indie games, but what I find interesting about your latest release, Postal, is that came out in, I want to say, 1997, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, where did the sort of idea to port Postal? Was it a developer came up to you, or was it just you sort of wanted to bring that to it? How'd that sort of pan out?
Yeah, Postal is very much the exception to the rule, in that it's not a new title for an old system, which is what everything else we do is. The idea behind that is that we noticed that the developer Dan Redfield was working on a port, and we'd spoken to him quite a bit because he's a local guy. He's based in Bury St Edmunds.
Okay.
Suffolk. And we were talking about maybe doing something at some point for quite some time, probably over a year now. He mentioned that he was doing this port of Postal, and I was sort of immediately thinking, okay, this is different, is unusual. You know, is that allowed? Can you publish this stuff? The answer is yes, because they actually, apparently, the original developers running with Scissors, they actually said, please can someone make a Dreamcast port of this game?
Oh,
So he was making that, and the plan was to just release it, like, just like throw it out there and see if anyone was interested. You know, maybe burn CDs, that sort of thing. And I said, we could potentially make this a little bit more special, something which people can have and hold and have in their collections. And he was pretty keen. So we basically spoke to the original developers, pitched them the idea, and they were, you know, very, very excited about the idea. Not least because it means that they can now have physical copies themselves of their own game finally after 25.
excellent.
That's the gist of that, basically.
Well, look, again, it's funny how that sort of turns out, that we live in a world where someone who made a game all that time ago can go, please, can someone make it on there, and you guys can sort of help, you know, the transition period to get there.
It's quite funny. It all sounds quite flippant, doesn't it? It's pretty much everything that we do it just sounded like a cool thing to do at the time, so we did it.
Yeah, well, that's the coolest thing about it, though, is like being a Sega Saturn fan and hearing all of the you know, what's going on with the world of Sega Saturn. It's almost like the Sega Saturn's got a second leash on life now, and the Dreamcast is exactly the same, where these talented people are coming together on the internet and go, wouldn't it be cool if, and then they make it happen with you know, ports that never meant to be, translations of games that never was. It's cool that you guys are part of that community where you can, you know, you're in a vocal group where people can sort of go, wouldn't it be cool? And you're there going, we can make that happen. We can do that.
Yeah.
Well, that's another reason why we try to be as relaxed and approachable as possible, because we want people to come to us with these sort of things and, oh, would you guys consider doing this? And it might be something that we've never thought of, but, you know, we will sit there and go, yeah, we probably could do that, actually.
Yeah.
So just a question about multiple ports and things. What exactly is the biggest differences of sort of taking a game and then releasing it on multiple ports? What like, for example, in my little mind, in my educated, uneducated brain and full of naivety, I'm thinking, well, you slap it on the disc and you go. But then there's things like, well, if it's on Dreamcast, you've got the UM sort of display thing on the controller, that surely there's something that goes into that, and the architectures and how it displays, how it saves on your console, so you get a different symbol for everything else. I'm assuming you are the guys really that can help developers sort of fill in those gaps as well.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I got one right, Mike.
It's a particularly interesting point, actually, because the way that games are made now is that they're built in engines. For example, the Unreal Engine, and they will be relatively easy to build a game and then say, right, okay, let's build it for Switch, for PS4, PS5, Xbox, all these different platforms. It's relatively easy to do that. Back then, with these older systems, the architecture between them was so different that it was a much harder task to bring a game from one platform to another. An example of that would be a PC game like Postal. Your average PC at the time would have a big hard drive with maybe 500 megabytes of storage, or a gigabyte or whatever. You'd have loads of RAM, 128 megabytes, let's say. But then the Dreamcast, on the other hand, has got like 16 megabytes, a fraction. So bringing something which is built to take full advantage of a much more powerful system and then basically shrinking it down so that it can be played on, really quite a considerably less powerful piece of hardware is an awful lot of work. So that's why it was so much work back then, and it still is really now to do that with the retro systems.
Unless, of course, they've sort of maybe designed with that in mind, or they've kind of gone with that. Yeah, because unlike, I'm not saying it's easy to necessarily do what you do these days, but no, I'm working in software myself. There's a lot of kits and pre-packaged in tools that are in software that helps you sort of save and move and program for multiple platforms, like you say. But I was just always quite curious because of it's not. Even back then, it wasn't just necessarily a software thing. It's also like a hardware, like controllers and buttons are all in different places.
Yeah.
They're not very
That's
similar to what they are now, where really, when you look at it, there's not a lot of difference between the controllers that are out there.
No.
You know,
2 analog sticks, 4 face buttons, that sort of thing.
Yeah, memory cards are not really a thing anymore. It's all just saving on a hard drive, you know. So I just always thought it must be quite challenging yet exciting to sort of help people get to those extra steps to put them on these retro consoles.
That's the most interesting, fun bit about it, really, to be honest, is the fact that it's seen by many as just that's impossible.
You got a little bit creative. I mean, that's one thing about Postal is obviously because it was on PC, you'd aim with your then move WASD, whatever it is, and so then when you try and put it onto a controller that doesn't have a second analog stick, you have to have a completely different targeting system because it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It requires a creative solution.
So with all these like indie games, and you've obviously got now Postal. What sort of were there any sort of things that you had to? It's like hits you had to take when it comes to porting it over to the Dreamcast. Did you have to sort of downgrade the audio, or was it a case of making the game?
Yes.
Obviously you had to make the game smaller, but is there any sort of challenges that you had when converting these indie games onto the Sega Dreamcast, other than obviously what you said with the controller and the different sort of button layouts and things?
There definitely are. One thing that you're restricted by is the game has to fit on a disc, preferably one disc, because 2 discs means more expensive. The Dreamcast is a pretty capable system, so you don't have to do too much, but the resolution is 480p basically.
Yeah.
So everything has to be downscaled to fit on that screen. It also has to be readable at that resolution, things like text and subtitles. So it's lots of little tiny things which you wouldn't expect that have to be considered. You're absolutely right about audio. That usually has to be downgraded slightly. Not in the case of Postal, because it's a game from '97, so it pretty much just went straight over as far as audio was concerned.
So it's obviously, apart from controller differences, is Postal more or less like a sort of direct translation from sort of...
Yeah, it's a fairly straight port. There are additional features which have been added just to make it a little bit more worthwhile. For example, it now has 4-player couch co-op, which the PC version never had. So you can sit down with three of your friends and go through the main campaign with all 4 of you on screen at the same time, working towards that one goal. The other thing is there are a bunch of add-ons for the game. So there was like a Japanese add-on called Super Postal, which had 2 extra levels, and then it had Japanese audio for the Japanese market. So we just said, okay, why not just combine it together and just make this ultimate package of the main game and then the 4 extra add-ons, and it's just on the one disc basically.
And you help the developer or be a part of sort of bringing that all together and making that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take too much credit for the actual development work. We pretty much just said, this is what we're going to do, and here's some money to
get on with it.
Time. Well, the thing is, most indie developers are part-time, right? So they're working their 9 to 5. They're working hard, and then they've got maybe an hour in the evening to spend. So it can sometimes be helpful to provide some funds and some support and help and advice and just everything that we can help with,
of course,
to justify their time, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the hardest thing sometimes. Yeah, absolutely.
With Postal, I doing my research, because I never sort of played Postal when it came out. With the release, which ending is it going to have? Is it going to have the original ending or the censored ending, or is it going to have both? Or
It has the original ending.
Oh,
Yes, yes. This is the I believe this is the first time it's ever been released uncut.
so from
on
a
a con-
publishing standpoint, was that quite difficult because of? I mean,
Yeah.
again, I'm completely ignorant to this, but from what I know, when you publish something, you have to be, strict on regulations and age strict, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Did you get any of that,
So-
or is that not really a factor?
So here's the thing: by today's standards, the game is no worse than your average Grand Theft Auto game
Right.
in terms of violence and controversy and the content. It really isn't. And I should probably be saying, oh, it's so controversial and trying to drum up that PR. But the reality is, it's not what it was 25 years ago.
Right.
In terms of how people perceive it.
Yeah, I think there is maybe a little bit of a dark psychological side that maybe isn't in stuff like GTA, but ultimately I would agree with.
I mean, Manhunt is a good example of a game that really pushed the envelope, and it's probably along those sort of lines.
Well, even if you look back at the original Mortal Kombat on how nasty that was interpreted back in the day, whereas now we look at it and it's load of gifs with paint splatters all over the screen, and we kind of laugh and say, "What was all the fuss about?"
Yes.
Things
Yeah.
of course age and things do change. I'm just curious as if an indie developer came to you and go, guys, I've got this kind of mature game, don't really know how to go about getting it out there.
Yeah.
You are able and equipped to sort of go through that.
Yeah, there's a line, isn't there? At the end of the day, there's and it's always changing what society is willing to accept. I generally think and are on the side of it's art.
Right.
And art ideally shouldn't be censored within reason, because there is always a line somewhere. But
There's exceptions, of course.
yeah,
We'd like to
there's
think our
always-
listeners have got some intelligence to understand that there obviously is going to be exceptions to the rule, but
Absolutely.
what you were describing there, I think it makes sense. So with the other part of the publishing and things like that, the other great thing that you do is you kind of bring everything together into a physical product. And I've been saying for years I want the instruction manual to come back, and I love opening the box and the experience of opening the box and all of that kind of stuff. What goes into sort of trying to get... Because I can imagine nowadays when a developer puts things together, or if they're doing something like Postal, they don't necessarily think about all of that kind of packaging as well. Is that something that you guys sort of bring together and create artwork for, or find images?
Yeah, we do a lot of work on that side of things.
Right.
These days, when a game is released on, let's say, for example, Steam, there's a small image which is your thumbnail for the game, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So there isn't really a lot of thought put into art and packaging and instruction manuals anymore. So luckily in the indie scene, most of these developers have experience with those games because they played them back in the day, and that's kind of what they're trying to recreate, and that's obviously what we're trying to do as well. So we don't usually have to do too much in the way of design, but there definitely have been a few titles where we've, Postal being one of them. I would show things, but we're in an audio medium, so
Don't worry about that. They can just listen. They can show us. We can go, ooh, wow, yeah. They can use their imagination, can't you, listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for the benefits of the listeners who are listening and not seeing,
Or
currently-
for not the benefit, if the case may be.
I'm currently holding the back insert from Postal for Dreamcast,
Great.
and there's an awful lot that goes into this from the obviously the obvious thing is like screenshots and text that all has to be written and taken and color corrected and whatnot. Translations into French, German, and Spanish, because all European games had those languages on the back, and we're all about authenticity, so we got those all translated. The barcodes, you have to pay for those. There's a company that you have to register that with.
Yes.
and then also, getting it printed and cut to the exact size. It's all work that had to be done, but I love staying up till 4 a.m. and 4 a.m. and working on this stuff. It's my favourite.
He says with much sarcasm in his voice.
Now, honestly, I really enjoy it. It's the end product when it arrives, and you can start sending it out to people, and then they start tweeting and saying, "Oh, thanks for doing this."
I mean, obviously, we want our product to be as legitimate as obviously it's a legitimate product, but to look as legitimate and professional as possible.
Yeah.
Because that's another stigma, is there are people out there who believe because it's an independent game that it's kind of not like,
it's not real.
Yeah.
It's not good or whatever.
Oh yeah, I mean, I get it all the time. I've got I'm the kind of guy that likes having things physical on the shelf. I like going into my living room and seeing the games lined up, and even though it can be a bit of a hassle to take them out of the box, put them in the console and everything else, I still love it. I love that whole experience and that whole presentation of it. I've paid for people to create inlays for my loose Game Boy Advance games and Game Boy games, and in on all their screenshots it looks really good, and then when it's arrives in the post and it's kind of all bled and the blacks are greens and it's not really cut to the right size, and this person doesn't give it any love or attention, you're kind of like, wow, I got ripped off. The fact that you guys go the extra mile just to make sure that everything fits legitimately, it looks like you would if you bought it back in 97, 98, is amazing, really.
Yeah.
And
that's the goal.
Yeah.
That's another reason why we like physical, though, is because we like having stuff on display. That's one of the things that is unfortunate about everything going digital, is you just don't have that element of display anymore. Like you about like films, you go to someone's house now, most people aren't going to have a bunch of DVDs on their shelf, and I always thought that was it was just a nice visual thing to have. So that's why I think it's good to have all of our games physical.
Yeah. When you used to go to your friend's house and they'd say, "Oh, what do you want to play?" And you'd have all the boxes to look at on the back, to look at the screenshots, to see maybe quotes from magazines on the back saying, "This is the best platformer ever made," and that sort of thing. And it really did help to discover new titles. I think that's kind of going away now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very visual person, so that's all very important to me.
Basically, we're selfish. We want it, so we make it.
No, that's cool. And I totally agree with you. Going around my mate's house to see what games he wants, that's a lot easier when you can see it on the shelf. Unless your name's Mike, and when he comes around yours and you go, "What game do you want to play?" and he looks at the 800 games you've got on the shelf and he goes, "Oh, no, what do you want to play?" And you're like, "For God's sake, I play them all the time. Mike, just choose a game."
Yeah.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Do you like video games? Do you like kick-ass characters? Do you like action and adventure? Then you should go to RagingDestiny.com and get your copy of Raging Destiny, an action-packed fantasy fiction today. A novel written by a gamer for a gamer. That's right, written by me, Bill, from Pop Culture Pause Screen. It's a non-stop thrill ride with in-depth characters that very well could be your next favourite franchise. There isn't any slowing down in this book, oh no. Every chapter is designed to keep you reading and wanting to know what happens next. You can find out more at RagingDestiny.com, and I thank you in advance for your support. Now, back to the show.
So with Postal, was there with the box art and things like that? Did you have to go back to the original sort of PC copy of it? Did you want to make it look like, sort of feel like, in terms of what the bios and things read, did you want it to feel like a game that came out, like the Dreamcast port came out today, or do you want it to feel like the Dreamcast port came out in 97? What was sort of the
put it bang on at the end there. We wanted to produce something that looked like it was made 25 years ago. It was quite tricky because, believe it or not, the company that made the game were an indie back then, so they didn't have a huge budget for artwork and whatnot. So what they produced is pretty close to what we've produced, which is a pretty basic piece of artwork, which is it's essentially like a mailing bag with a logo on the front of it. Nice and simple, doesn't tell you anything about the game whatsoever, but it's become iconic.
Yeah.
So it was a real conscious decision to try and honour that as closely as possible. The complication, however, came that in the space of 25 years, all of that art has been lost. They don't have any of it. We even went on a special mission to contact all the old magazines, the old editors, people who specifically archive this stuff. None of them had any of it.
Wow.
We ended up having to buy an original copy of the game, spent about 200 quid on it,
Jeez.
which is mad, for a game of that age. But it's just because it was a cult classic. And we essentially had to dismantle the game and get high quality scans made of every single part of it.
Wow.
And then get it all cleaned up. So, yeah, a lot of work went into it, but I think the end result is something that looks authentic and people are happy to hold it and own it.
That's definitely one difference that we had to go through there, is because obviously there's already an existing fan base for this game. So we were trying to be as
sympathetic to their nostalgia as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quality.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of, I suppose obviously this is your first sort of stab at making a port of a game that came out years ago. Is there any sort of interest? I know obviously there's a lot of issues with licensing and all that sort of thing, but is there any interest in sort of taking more of those old games and sort of giving them new life on the Sega Dreamcast?
We would love to. Like you said, licensing is tricky. What you find with games back then, they were either made by developers which no longer exist, and therefore it's pretty difficult to get into contact with someone to even ask the question, or they've been bought out by the likes of EA, and in which case, good luck. Good luck having a conversation with anybody. It's just it's too big to have a conversation with the likes of us. But it's definitely something which we're interested in and we're active.
Yeah, like I say, Postal's given us that opportunity to, effectively prove that we can do it and potentially open up some doors. So
it's like it is a foot in the door kind of project, isn't it? You've proven you can do it. You've proven that you handle it with care and with quality, and people have been receptive of it in a positive manner. So come on then, lads.
Yeah.
Which ones are on your list? Which ones are you sort of thinking, yeah, let's do that, or I can't wait until that opportunity? Have you got any sort of games out there that makes you think, yeah, I can't wait until that opportunity comes up, let's do that game?
It probably sounds quite basic, but Postal 2 would be nice.
Because you've already got the infrastructure, you've got all the scans, you just got to change a few of the screenshots and away you go.
yeah, exactly. I just think about games which were never really on Sega systems, like and are missing essentially. I wouldn't say, it'd be nice to have Soul Calibur 3 because Calibur 2 on Dreamcast, for example. But it would be cool to have like a Grand Theft Auto, for example, or what would be a good example of a game which never came to Sega consoles but isn't owned by Nintendo or Sony?
I suppose if you're posing the question, I'd like to sort of see some of the Sega games that were going to be for the Dreamcast at some point, but then got moved over to other things. So like Panzer Dragoon Auto, Crazy Taxi, I think 3 was the one that didn't make it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That kind of stuff that always seemed like it was in the wrong place on other consoles because it was kind of destined for the Dreamcast, but the Dreamcast didn't live long enough.
Sonic Heroes, is a good example.
Yeah, maybe the Golden Axe demo, which you got one level of. Yeah,
that's true.
That kind of stuff.
I think there's infinite possibilities. Really, it's just a case of finding something which people have a connection to and they want to be on the system, because it's all very well me saying I want it, but there needs to be real people out in the real world that want it as well. That was the thing with Postal, is that there's a sort of a pre-made audience who want this, The important thing to note actually is that Postal never came to any console whatsoever. It was always a PC exclusive.
Yeah.
And there were rumors for a long, long time. I remember that there were rumors that were saying, Postal might be coming to Dreamcast at the time, and it never happened.
It's so poetic that you guys are the ones that sort of made that prediction on a magazine somewhere where someone had a glint that might be a possibility, and you actually connected the dots. And he's probably he or she is sitting at home going, "I told you it was going to happen," and now he's they've been proven right.
I want to go and find those people and say, "Oh, by the way, we did it."
Absolutely. I mean, if it was me, and saying that, I probably was quite excited to review it as well. So, hey, if you wanted to review the game back then, it's now available. Chuck the review on there. Get in touch with Wave on Twitter. I'm sure that can happen as well.
Yeah, it's funny if you go back and look at all of the contemporary reviews from back then. They all say this is the worst game ever made. But then all the reviews from now are saying almost the complete opposite. This is a real classic, and it's beloved by many. I'm not really quite sure what's happened in those 2.5 decades.
I think it's the same thing that people thought Shenmue was a masterpiece and it could never grow old, and now you get some people who get Shenmue 3 where things haven't really changed, and it's technically the same kind of game, but they're complaining that it hasn't moved forward, and it's weird how people's perceptions change when everything around in the world sort of moves along, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much truth it is to it as well, but with publications, it seemed to just mirror what the other people were saying.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I can imagine there'll be quite the worry that you're the one magazine who's got a different opinion to every other magazine out there, and someone calls you out on it. That would be quite anxious.
Oh, definitely.
So, do you play any? Do you have time to play any other retro games yourself? What particular ones inspire you to do the most? And
to be honest, not a lot of time these days. But when I do, I mostly play racing games. I can believe that, which is maybe surprising because we've not really put any racing games out other than one Down Racer.
Dude, there's some quality racing games coming out in the last 5 years, and some of them are right up my street that harken back to Outrun and Daytona and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Daytona, Outrun, Sega Rally. Those are kind of like the arcade racer games that I used to play like all the time.
Yeah.
I think they are ripe for a comeback.
Yeah, and you've got things like Hot Shot and what's the other one?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, those sort of games that harken back to that age. Again, those indie developers saying there's a gap in the market here, and I miss these games, and bringing those back. So
yeah,
racing's hot right now.
Well, if rumours are to be believed, Outrun might be coming back soon.
Ah, you heard it here first. That's our first exclusive on the show, Mike. Was there any other games that you sort of had? You get time to play, or you really inspire you in the retro community?
I play quite a bit of Streets of Rage.
4?
All of them.
All of them.
4 especially. Yeah. 1, 2. Lesser on the 3, but 1, 2, and 4 mainly.
If it weren't for that soundtrack,
it does add quite a bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
It really helps. No, I do wish I had more time. We're playing the games that we're putting out. We're playing hundreds of hours of, so kind of taking a lot of the free time away. But
yeah, my recent game library has been, as you say, games we're putting out, or when we're
little indies which are quick to play for.
Or someone is sending us something for consideration. Like we'll get sent a lot of games like Steam keys to play those as well. It's kind of a lot of the games that we've been playing as well.
Oh, right. So when you guys actually publish a game, are you sort of part of the testing process to make sure that all runs as well? Is that all part of your remit?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, it would be pretty terrible if we put something out and it didn't work properly.
Oh yeah, it goes without saying. It's just you don't really sort of think about that, do you? You kind of think, well, it works in its in its environment. It works on the PC. It works on that. I think sometimes it goes without. You think things go without saying, but I think that extra level of complexity, you've put it on a disc, on a console, and you're putting it out there for people to buy. It wasn't until you just said it there where I suddenly realised, of course, you have to fully test that product, don't you?
Yeah, because we're basically saying, look, we stand for quality. If you buy something from us, we've personally been involved in every single step.
As I said earlier, like, we put out games that we like. So ultimately, we've played it to know that we enjoy it. So everything that has been put out, we're quite familiar from that personal enjoyment and perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Intrepid Izzy, the game actually keeps track of your playtime, and I'm up to 102 hours now.
Jeez.
Which is
and Flea's not an easy game, so you must have played quite a lot of that too.
Oh yeah, Flea. Yeah, that's a lot of time's been spent on that one.
Yes, it's a joyfully frustrating one.
Yeah, so, I was going to say that's one of those punishing platform games, and I'm just thinking, testing that to make sure it fully works on everything. You guys must be pretty good at that game by now.
It's crazy. It's crazy how far that game's gone. Actually, it's on Evercade, and it's one of the most popular titles on the Evercade.
Yeah, it's got a mobile version now.
Wow.
There's a couple of other platforms which we're not really allowed to talk about, but it's really getting out there. Antstream as well. I'm sure people are familiar with that now.
So do you have like it's kind of like an open-ended question here. I'm sure you're just going to say, "Oh yeah, sure, we'd look into that." But if you can dive into it a bit more on what the complications might be or why you haven't done it yet, that might be quite interesting. Have you ever thought about doing like collector's editions of games that you've released? Things with special collecting boxes, key rings. We get all that kind of stuff in a box set. Is that something that you've looked into?
We've done a little bit of that.
All right, cool.
There was a collector's edition of Intrepid Izzy, which came with 2 vinyl figures. And an art book and a soundtrack.
They were released separately as well, were they not?
So the vinyl figures were released separately, but everything else is exclusive to the collector's box.
Oh, cool.
It's a bit of a slow seller, just because of the fact that maybe 5% of people that love a game will love it enough to want all of that extra stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most merch that's bought for games is from like quite large franchises with that game. So when there's only one, it's hard for one to be as invested to actually go out and purchase one of the larger collector editions.
But it's definitely something that we do.
This is why I say maybe coming back to revisiting it, because you've already explained the complications of a brand new franchise, an unheard brand. But there's also the possibility of that blowing up and becoming a cult following, or maybe even greater than that. So going back and maybe doing a collector's edition, I have no problem in a game I've already bought that I love, and sometimes I get frustrated. Like I played Celeste and loved it, didn't realise how good that game was, and then when I looked and saw the collector's edition, I was like, oh well, I wouldn't have necessarily bought it on launch because I didn't know if it was going to be any good, but now I'd love to have an opportunity to buy one of those again. Could you go back and sort of revisit them, and what's the complications of trying to put together a collector's edition distribution and manufacturing wise?
Really, it's mainly down to manufacturing. With a lot of this stuff, you've got minimum orders. So on the CDs, for example, so you need to know that there's at least 3 people that want it,
right?
Which is just difficult as an indie, because you might put a poll out saying, "Do you want this? Yes or no?" And then however many people say yes, I do, but then when you actually make it, it's a slightly different situation sometimes.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of guesswork, and there's also a leap of faith involved, which we're willing to take. We generally have a pretty good feel about whether something's worth people's time.
Quality. I look forward to my collector's edition of Postal on the Dreamcast coming out soon.
Well, we've got the well, actually, it hasn't been announced yet. There's
Oh, he almost let it slip. He almost did.
there's an let's say an alternate version,
Ah.
which is not something that, and I'm very keen to stress this, it's not something that you have to have. It's very much if you love the franchise and you want to have something a little bit different, a little bit unique, maybe that you haven't seen elsewhere. It would be good. It'd be good for those people.
Quality.
I imagine something like a 30th anniversary postal, like, or something like that would be definitely a cool collectibles thing if you ever consider something like
Well,
that
it's the 25th anniversary in, I believe, October.
Yeah.
So that should give you some rough idea of what we're dealing with.
Oh. So we've got to hang on to this podcast a little while before, so we don't announce something that you haven't already. You can sort of wait for that window. But
Well, on the subject of Postal, there's a lot of stuff that's happening with that franchise this year. There's a documentary being made, which is public information, so I'm not spilling the beans necessarily there. It's an interesting franchise. A lot of people know about it, but it's maybe not quite so mainstream.
I know it from Civi on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
The YouTuber who does a lot of PC first-person shooters. He covers Postal quite a lot. So he is the voice of the guy. In fact, he's in it. He's the guy behind the counter of the new ones in the. I don't know if it's a comic book store or whatever.
yeah, that would be from Postal 4, which I haven't played yet.
Yeah,
I do have a copy, but
yeah, I watch him on YouTube. He's very good, very funny, and he's a part of that game. So he covers a lot of it. That's how I found out about Postal. So its cult following is growing. So it's good to sort of have an opportunity to play the first one in a more open forum.
a new way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that any sort of games that you sort of grew up with that sort of inspired you down this sort of path that you sort of went down? I know you said that you were a big Sega Saturn fan and you like your racing games.
Yeah.
Is there sort of like get that one game that you sort of played and you went, right, this is going to have to be a lifestyle almost, like this is going to have to be something that I want to sort of pursue almost?
I've always been a gamer. I was perhaps a little bit what you would call casual, perhaps, because I would play your Sonic the Hedgehogs, your Marios.
Dude, that's not casual. That's mainstream.
Well, that's what I mean. You know, I never really took a dive into playing anything which required looking at, in the game shop, the lower levels of the shelf. The things
I
that
got what you mean. Yeah.
that aren't your massively.
Your rare JRPGs.
Yeah, I was never playing that.
Your Suikodens and Grandies of the world.
I mean, I didn't even play Shenmue when it first came out, to be honest. It just seemed like too much effort.
We just lost our Dreamcast fans. Thanks for that.
I've since changed my mind on that, but at the time it was, do I really have 200 hours to play this?
The answer is yes, and those Dreamcast fans just came back. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's great to hear. No, I was playing Sonic Adventure and Metropolis Street Racer, games like that. Really, arcadey stuff, basically.
Which is what the Dreamcast was all about. Let's face it.
That's very true. That's very true. And the same goes for the Mega Drive. Buying were those that you could just pick up and play and play with friends.
So sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say we got our consoles a little bit later in their life, so when it come to picking up the games that we did, we were typically buying the ones that had been quite heavily reduced, which would be your most common games anyway. So that's kind of how our library of games built up in the first place.
That's true, actually, and that's something that I really mentioned, is that we tended to like have hand-me-downs from cousins.
Right.
So so in like when the Mega Drive was like the big thing that everyone had, we didn't have one, but we did have an Acorn Electron.
Right.
which is like very much at that time that was like, oh, this old piece of rubbish computer that you've got to type the games in yourself.
I think it sort of worked in our favour. I'm 28, so like, I was playing games that realistically, probably for my age, people probably just wouldn't have ever have had the opportunity growing up.
Yeah.
They would have moved on to the newer things, really. So I
Yeah,
mean,
same.
I'd be playing like N64 and like SNES at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we got a Super Nintendo like the year before the N60.
Yeah, I was myself always like a year or two behind because just it was too expensive to grab them straight away. So there's quite a few games that I played because I stayed with a console a bit longer than other people because of like you say the prices go down or you pick things up in car boot sales and you get like a job lot because people want to sell their games to get the newest brand new thing. And it's interesting that you say, like you mentioned, you know, those quote unquote rubbish games that other people might not have picked up. People who have tended to stay with those games and understand how they work and how they tick tend to get into the industry more. Whereas I find people who moved with the times find it a little bit more difficult to understand how, you know, development and programming and all of that work. So
We're not seeing the history of it so much.
yeah, absolutely. It builds a good, strong foundation for you to sort of break down those doors. So talking about building strong foundations and sort of understanding your way in, how do you build like relationships with developers and sort of find that, you know, those communication pathways? Is there an open forum? Is there like a yellow pages that you can find that you sort of open up? How does it all work?
That would be nice. That would be nice. I could probably talk for an hour on this topic, but you've got three main categories. You've got developers, you've got people that are playing, and you've got people that are able to talk about it and influence. Perhaps is like the word that you would use these days, but basically, in the olden days that would be magazines, right?
Yeah.
On the actually, there's another one which is retail because we're very much into the whole retail thing, which is one of the things that makes us weird and unique is the fact that we're really keen on retail.
How's what do you mean by that? Can you explain that?
So most indies don't bother getting their games into retail stores, like basically retro game stores at this point. But essentially, the shops that would have sold new games 25 years ago, you know, your little, as the Americans call, mum and pop kind of bricks and mortar shops where you'd go and buy your new release games. The modern equivalent of that, I suppose, is retro games shops, right? Because on the new side, it's just game. That's all there is now. And even then, they're more merch these days than actual games.
Yes.
But because we're releasing games that are nostalgic in nature, we also want the buying experience to feel nostalgic in nature. So we said right from the beginning, we want these games to be in shops. We want people to be able to go to their local shop, browse the collection of retro titles, and then our titles will be in with them. And most people will be surprised to see them because they haven't heard of them.
Kind of that. What's this kind of purchase?
Yeah, and it's exactly the same way that you would have bought games back in the day. You will be browsing the games and you will see a title that you're not familiar with, but it has a pretty cool cover. You turn it round and look at the back, and you think, "Yeah, I'll give this a go."
I think we find it really interesting as well to just be able to put a new product in, you know, an industry that's predominantly secondhand. Like if you go into independent stores, like you get that excitement of finding a particular game that if you're a collector, for example, but you don't really get that excitement anymore of finding something that you weren't looking for.
Your diamond in the rough. But yeah, on to go back to your original question, because I kind of moved away from that a little bit.
We do that here all the time, don't worry about it.
Yeah. But I think it's important to note that retail is important to what we do, and we think that it's also important to support them. So what we basically did last year was we decided to go and visit every single one.
Wow. How many are we talking here? Like, how many do you normally deal with across the UK, just roughly?
114.
Jeez.
Yeah, quite a few. And I think there's a few more which we maybe haven't heard of yet somehow.
Okay. That's quite a road trip, chaps. That sounded like a good time.
Took about 3 months, I think.
Jeez. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was a costly exercise, but it was worthwhile.
Great.
No, we basically just went on, did like a massive research session to find out where every single one, made a big map, and then as we were going, it was tick, 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 we've been to that one. And it was a really cool experience because we ended up going to game shops in Scotland and Northern Ireland, Wales, all across the country, basically. And meeting all these different shop owners, and most of them are hardcore gaming fans.
Of course.
They're doing it because that's what they love doing. Not all of them, but the majority. That's why they're doing it.
I think you have to sort of survive in the current market, do you not?
Yeah, and we kind of had to take that approach because I'll be honest with you, the first title that we really pushed hard was Intrepid Izzy, and I started off by emailing all of them, and I think I got about 2 responses.
Right.
What we later found out when we went there, everybody thought it was a prank.
Right.
Like I was just someone who was deluded, and I thought I had made a game or something.
Well, I get back to that whole legitimacy of a product, isn't it? It's like they've never heard of you, and
Yeah, like people were literally saying, "Oh, that was." I thought that was a joke. No, it's real. It's right here. It's real.
I've got it in my hand.
Yeah, so we had to do that.
You go into that kind of level of effort though, just proves your determination and like your commitment to the cause, and that's must quantify into people getting on board with what Wave does, and clearly
it does seem to, yeah. It does seem to be having that effect, and I think that's the best way to advertise what you do, is to do it, and people will, over time, they will start to notice what you're doing.
Great.
It's like if you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah,
that kind
absolutely.
I believe that was a Wayne's World quote. I don't know.
I don't know. I think that might be that baseball movie where the guy had to build a baseball thing in the
Field of Dreams.
That's the one. See,
yeah.
Someone who's a lot more cultured than I am who knows the answer to these questions.
It's also a case of every game that you publish is a stone in the water. Every game's an opportunity for someone to find it and then sort of go on to all your other stuff. Whereas if you just have one sort of game, I imagine it was hard when you published your first game because people look on your website and that's all you've done, sort of thing.
There's one game, yeah.
Process of sort of just going game after game, getting more and more recognition. I imagine that was quite difficult.
Yeah, that is absolutely happening. Despite the fact that I've worked in marketing for years, I'm not really using any of those skills. I'm finding that it's just so much better to just make the product, make it awesome, and then just get it out to as many people as possible, and they will do your marketing for you, essentially.
Not what you know, who you know, and the making the connections makes all that difference. So
yeah, and at the end of the day, even if we only sold a handful of copies of each game, we've enjoyed the process,
and that proves without a shadow of a doubt that it's a passion project, if nothing else, which is great to hear.
Another thing which we've kind of been quite interested in is the resurgence of video game magazines. So back in the day you'd have your Power magazine, the official Saturn magazine, whatever,
Absolutely.
Tons of them. There's been a number of them which have started up in recent years, which the popularity of them has been pretty surprising. One of them, which we've been particularly interested in, is called Sega Powered, which is by the original editor from Sega Power magazine and Saturn.
Yes.
back in the 90s. So it's the same dude, and he's basically just said, right, we're going to do this again. Go and do this new magazine. Talk about some of the retro stuff that came out back then. Re-review stuff that we did then and see what our opinion is now, 25 years later. But also start talking about some of the indie stuff, and then also the software that Sega's now putting out on platforms.
Right.
And we basically they're on. I think they've just released issue 4, so it's fairly new. But already it's proving to be really popular with specifically Sega fans.
It's a damn good magazine. It really is good. It's like proper how they used to write it back in the day. The good stuff. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, same writers, so it's kind of like the same ingredients.
Yeah,
as back then.
So good.
But what we're doing is we thought it would be really cool with issue 5, which they're going to be releasing at the end of. To basically give away a Dreamcast demo.
Wow.
Which is the first Dreamcast demo disc in 21 years.
Oh, that's amazing.
So we've got 4 games. I think 3 or 4 trailers, and then a bunch of photos and behind-the-scenes stuff.
That is so cool, because I know from my Sega communities, especially in Sega Saturn and Dreamcast ones, there's a lot of collectors who go out to try and collect all these demo discs that were in the magazines, people passing them around trying to complete sets. They would lose their mind if there was like a new one that would come out. Would you sort of call it the same name as I can't remember what they called. I want to say Dream Key, but that's wrong. That's the disc that you did get the Dreamcast online, isn't it?
The demo discs were called Dream On.
That's it. Yeah. Would you be able to sort of release them as Dream On? I can't imagine you would. Or...
we have to call it something else.
Right, that's what I thought.
It does. The name isn't fully like fleshed out yet. We've not got long to choose it, to be honest, but we'll have to come up with something. But it will be something like the dream lives on, or
something like a play on words that kind of fits in with the rest of the series, so it won't look odd against the rest of them, but it's still its own thing. Maybe
like Still Dreaming, something like that.
I was going to say Keep Dreaming, but then I was like, well, that doesn't quite work.
Keep dreaming. Yeah. No, that's pretty.
Yeah, but it's just called Keep Dreaming.
And look, there's a lot of indie games out there that are awesome. Not all of them are anything to do with us. There are others available, but it would be really nice to be able to just give a little selection to people that don't have to pay for it. It just comes with the magazine, and that they can just play them for a little while, spend a few hours playing these new games, and it helps to get the word out that this stuff exists. Basically,
that's a fantastic idea. I love it, and I wish you guys all the best in getting that done, because there's a certain nostalgia attached to that as well. But it also there's so many games that I've picked up because of demo discs that's kind of like a lost art. And I just know for a fact people are going to lose their mind. Maybe call it Dreaming On. Something like that, Of course, if that is what you call them, then my agent will call your agent, and we'll go from there. But
yeah, we'll work out the details.
Absolutely. But I hope it goes really well, guys, because that's a fantastic idea, and I look forward to seeing how that pans out for you. So the last few questions from me then, chaps, is more about people finding you and what's next for Wave. So what is coming up for Wave in the future? Have you got plans?
Well, I suppose we've spoken about Postal quite a bit, but that's going to be released 2nd of June is like the official release date.
Right.
Although that's a lot of the pre-orders have been sent out already, so everyone will be receiving that any day now.
Great.
On the 2nd of July, we've got a game called Shadow Gangs, which is can only be described as Shinobi-esque.
Ah, right up my street.
Yes, and it's just as hard as your Shinobis as well.
Okay, so, good.
Yeah, it's
What are we talking? Are we talking Shinobi 3 difficulty, or are we talking Shadow Dancer difficulty? Because Shadow Dancer has its moments where it's just like, what?
3. I would say 3 is the one that it's the most in common with.
Cool.
It's in a lot of ways it's nothing like Shinobi, other than it's a ninja.
Oh right, so we could be Ninja Gaiden then. We could be.
Yeah, but it's a 2D platform where you're a guy called Dan, and your family's been kidnapped, and you basically have to go and defeat this evil shadow organization of evil ninjas, basically, and robots and various other baddies. Bring your family back home, and then also just destroy them.
Quality.
Just get vengeance, basically.
Quality sounds good to me.
It's got a rocking soundtrack, and I think that's really important for games of that era.
Hey, if you're not a ninja game with a rocking soundtrack, you're not even trying. You've got to have that soundtrack to go with your ninja game.
Yeah, super important.
Absolutely. So where can? Sorry, go on, Mike.
Is that a releasing to the Dreamcast? That one.
Yeah, so that's actually on quite a few platforms. That's on Xbox, Switch, PS4, and Steam. So they're out basically right now. Right. And the Dreamcast version was in direct response to Dreamcast fans asking for it.
Oh,
so it's another one of those people ask for it, therefore we make it happen type situation.
Okay. So where can people go to sort of ask for them? Where can they find you on social media? And if they are a developer looking for some sort of publishing power that you can offer, how do they get in touch?
So we're basically on all social media under the name Wave Game Studios, which is the username would be all one word. So that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok now, because apparently that's something you have to do now.
Apparently, yeah. Don't worry, all your descriptions of things will be in the chat. Description box, just to make it easier for you.
There's our website as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We're always out there listening and engaging people.
And that's the same for developers. If a developer's listening to this and they want to get in touch, they'll have to send you something, or do they have to prepare anything?
Oh no, they can be as casual as they like. They can just strike up a conversation on social media, or they can email us on our website. We've had emails that's just like, "Hey guys, what do you think of this?" And it's as simple as that, and we can start a dialogue, to use the business term.
Great stuff. And there we have it. Like I said, all your contacts will be in the description. If you're listening, go check out the description below to get those links, so you can get in touch with Wave Studios and see what they're all about, or if you've got a product that they might be able to help you with, it will direct you to them so they can have a chat.
Awesome.
Excellent stuff.
We look forward to hearing from everybody.
Excellent. Is that everything from yourself, Mike?
Yeah, no, that's covered all the questions I wanted to ask. But I just want to say thanks for coming along. We're only a small podcast. I know you sort of somewhat know us from association with OLL and John and all that. But regardless of that, we do appreciate you sort of taking time out of your day to have us on the podcast.
No, and thanks for having us. It's
been an enjoyable chat. So we're always
every opportunity we can take to talk about this stuff, we'll take.
Yeah, we're all about the indie games here as well, so we can shine a light. And if you've got anything coming out, anything we can do to spread the word, or if you want to jump back on, we'll be happy to have you if you're willing to come back.
Sounds good. I suppose it's worth mentioning that we've got a Dreamcast game every month this year.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Oh, the way you were talking, I thought you only had 2 games coming up. Are you holding out on us?
Well, that's all that we've announced thus far.
Right. Okay.
Every month we have a game coming out. We're calling it the year of the Dreamcast.
Brilliant. And I guess the only way to find out what they are is to get on your social medias. We haven't got any exclusives for our show, no?
Everything is down to the wire, so we pretty much make agreements and whatnot finalized like right at the last second.
Gotcha.
So that's what's coming out. We just want to make sure everything is as awesome as possible before
Sure
we.
Will be. Sure will be. You guys, the stuff you guys make is great. It was brilliantly recepted, like I said, in anything I've seen you're very engaged on your socials when you talk to people, and but the passion filters through, and people can see that passion, and that goes a long way. So I know whatever you put your name to, it's going to be a top quality product. And if you want to see more about Wave, definitely go onto their socials and check out their website so you don't miss out on what could potentially be a special product that you can have on your shelf and say, yes, I got that thing that I never thought it was going to be released. So thank you so much for being on the show, guys. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your kind words as well.
Thanks for listening to the Pop Culture Pausecast. Check the channel for other episodes, new podcast every Wednesday. Or, if you're one of the cool ones, you can watch some of my other videos right here on Pop Culture Pause Screen, or maybe catch me live on Twitch every Monday from 7 PM UK time. And show some love to my partner in crime, Mike, over at his YouTube channel, Mike Ritiques. Link in the description. He does some great game reviews, he really does. And if you want some action, adventure, and kick-ass characters in your life, then go over to RagingDestiny.com and get a copy of my book, Raging Destiny, a novel for gamers written by me, a gamer. You won't regret it, and I appreciate your support. That's RagingDestiny.com. You should have links to all of this in the description below, or on screen now for you to click. But for now, it's time to stop talking and go play some bloody video games. Catch you next time.